is Monmon from First Four Figures, and welcome to another launch stream. Today, we are unveiling the latest addition to our Dark Souls lineup, the Nameless King resin statue. Now, we've previously released Gravelord Nito, Solera of Astora, Mimic, Artorias the Abyss Walker, the Great Grey Wolf Sith, and Dragon Slayer Ornstein, and they have all been presented with wonderful details. So, of course, the Nameless King will present nothing short of that. Now, I gotta say, when I first saw him, I was like, gosh, this script is going to be a long one, because the amount of details that went into this is just incredible. And once I show you guys, I'm sure that you will agree. So, without further ado, let's reveal him in 3, 2, 1. Boom! Well, thought you'd never hear that again, huh? Well, here next to me, it is the standard edition of Nameless King, also known as King of the Storm, and at his feet is his Storm Drake, which, if you've played the game, you would know that you have to go to Archdragon Peak, ring the large bell at the Great Belfry, and the Nameless King will be available for a boss fight. Now, I don't know about you, but when he rode in with his Storm Drake, even though it was a playthrough, I thought that there was wind blowing in my face, because his presence in the game is so strong that I felt it from beyond the screen. Now, his pose here was inspired by the cutscene after players' first fight with the King of the Storm. Now, he is seen standing next to his defeated Storm Drake at his left hand on the horn, as if to say goodbye to his defeated companion, because the next thing that happens is him using the Dragon Slayer Sword Spear on his right hand to slay the Storm Drake and absorb its powers, becoming the Nameless King. Now, this scene was very powerful, not just in terms of their presence, but the scene evokes our emotions as we wonder as players, having to slay his companion, how the Nameless King may have felt. Now, let's move on to the details. First of all, in order to emulate that strong storm-like presence, our team put in a lot of effort to make sure that the sculpt and colors were accurate and could represent that. So, an aspect in this statue that really stands out is the Nameless King's hair. Now, in terms of sculpt, our team used a streamlined sculpt to make the hair seem more as if it's being blown back by the wind. Now, the way that the hair strands are sculpted, it's meant to imitate the look of unruly hair in the wind, without taking away from the Nameless King's presence. Now, the color for the hair went through quite a bit of changes before we got to this perfect grayish white. Now, the scarf that he is wearing has also been sculpted to look as if it has been blown back and is flowing in the wind. Now, we'll talk more about the scarf details when we talk about his armor, so don't worry. Now, the appearance of the hair and the scarf here really help to represent the strong wind and storms that we've seen in the video game when we meet him. Now, the hair all flows from his head, that's mostly covered by his scarf, and he is wearing a crown. Now, you can see only his eyes and the top of his nose, and they have been sculpted to look hollow, and the gray color used to paint his skin makes the aesthetic look dry and weathered. Now, the same technique was also used for the parts of his forearms and the legs that are visible. And if you close up on his face, you'd actually see that he has a slight frown, as his brows have been sculpted to have that expression. Now, he is wearing a crown that has 7 spikes, and in the center there is a small embellishment. Now, the embellishment has been sculpted to look carved out, which is not easy considering the size of the crown. Now, the small and intricate details are also in other parts of his outfit, which includes his bracelet, his gold chest piece, as well as the gold shoulder piece, which you can see parts of underneath this thick scarf. Now, the gold chest piece's design resembles a rib cage, and the ribs are all sculpted to look twisted in an almost organic manner, looking like branches and vines. Now, all the ribs come together in the center, which also goes down to a thick waistband. Now, the grooves are all sculpted to look and feel three-dimensional. Now, the patterns on the gold pieces are very streamlined, and it's very akin to the way that wind is often sculpted. And in this case, it ties in very well with the Nameless King as the King of the Storm. There is a small feather accent at the front of his shoulder piece, and on it you can actually see lines that are sculpted to create the shape of the feathers. Now let's move on to talk about his Dragon Slayer Sword Spear, which uses the same techniques as the other gold features. It has been sculpted to look three-dimensional, so the design looks like it's been carved out. Now the blade at the front has two deep ridges down the center, which are indented. The handle of the sword spear also has a distinct sculptural design, and where the Nameless King is holding, there is a wrap sculpted there, which has a different, smoother texture than the rest of his weapon. Now the wrap has the natural wrinkles sculpted to imitate real cloth material, and having it painted with a white helps to differentiate its material from the rest of the weapon. Thanks to our team, the Dragon Slayer's sword spear has been beautifully replicated here. I've talked about the sculptural aspects of the golden features on the Nameless King, and for those features, our team wanted the gold features to have the look of peeling gold. That was a lot of gold in there, but you get the idea. For our reference, our team was inspired by the look of peeling gold that we'd see on ancient Egyptian, let me see if I can pronounce this, sarcophagus. The look was achieved by adding the texture to imitate how weathered materials would look. The combination of the patches of gold with the dark shade really helped to replicate the peeling gold effect beautifully. And pairing it with the cracks that we see on the various parts of the golden features really emphasized the weathered look even more. All in all, the gold features look very realistic, and it really represents the aged aesthetics that is paired with our Nameless King. The same technique has been applied to the other smaller gold embellishments, like the strap that comes down from his waistband. Now at the end of each strap is a gold embellishment that has been painted to look not nearly as weathered as the rest of his gold armor, but still pretty aged. Now the straps are painted and textured to imitate weathered leather, so we can see hints of light brown on the edges, and the majority of each strap is a darker shade, to represent what peeling leather looks like in real life. Now on each strap there are silver circle decorations that have been sculpted, and there are scratches and dents on the silver circles to represent age. And just underneath the golden chest piece, you can see the parts of a belt buckle, which is probably what the straps are attached to if this armor were real. The Nameless King's armor is called the Dragon Scales set, and on various parts of his armor here, you can see details of the dragon scales. There are many layers to his armor, and it would seem that the scale layer goes on top of a cloth-like material. They are colors that make them look blue with a slight sheen so as to represent the mythical nature of dragons. Now the scales are sculpted to look like distinct pieces being put together to make this. And underneath the dragon scale waistcloth is another part of the armor that's most likely fabric. So our team also added canvas-like textures to this part. Now at the end of this waistcloth are torn edges that have been emphasized with not only a lighter shade, but also by the sculpt. This waistcloth does seem to elongate into the long train behind him, which is grayer in color, and has been sculpted to look old and ripped. Our team included these sculptural details that imitate the look of fabric shredding and falling apart, so the threads were emphasized during the sculpting process. Now on the other parts of the armor that's blue, like the dragon scales, our team replicated the feathers through sculpt and texture. The feather details are underneath the straps of the waistband as well as the sleeves. And the feather details on the waist strap are meant to look like individual pieces of feather, and the texture on each feather imitates the grooves and the lines. Those are further emphasized by the painting, of course. And on his sleeves, the feathers are designed to look layered and more voluminous than that of the feather details on the waistband. From underneath the feathers details on his sleeves, you can see a patterned layer with hints of the same blue used for the scales and feathers, as well as hints of red. Now the washed out application of the paint really helped to create the look that the sleeves are weathered and old. The texture imitated here is of course real fabric, and underneath those sleeves we can see the look of ripped cloth. And the way it's been sculpted helps to replicate how it would look in the wind, or in this case, the storm. Now another feature of his armor that brings about the sense of movement that we would assume or associate with the King of the Storm is his scarf that's wrapped around his neck and shoulders, as well as the train behind him. Now the scarf behind his neck is sculpted to feel weighted. The creases that you'd see on real fabric are realistically replicated here. The shades used to paint the shadows on the creases really help to emphasize the weighted look. The two straps on the back are sculpted to look like they are violently flowing in the wind. The texture on the scarf feels reminiscent to reptile skin, so as to beckon back to the fact that this armor is called the Dragon Scale armor. A small detail that of course our team had to include to ensure accuracy. And speaking of accuracy, the details on the storm drake are unbelievably realistic. Well, as realistic as you can be with a mythical creature. First of all, to adapt to the statue, our team included parts of the storm drake, namely the head, his forearms, and part of his body. Now the storm drake's head is laying at the side of the Nameless King's feet, and of course, we have a reason behind it. Dark Souls fans may know that his boss fight includes 2 phases. In the first phase, along with the storm drake, he is referred to as the King of the Storm. But after phase 2 and absorbing the dragon's energy, he is referred to as the Nameless King. And this beckons to the moment after he slays his mount. Let's start big and then we can get into the nitty-gritty details. Now the body of the storm drake is covered in large dragon scales that were sculpted to look like not only individual scales but also thicker, so as to differentiate from the other dragon scales on this statue. Now as these scales are on the body, it made sense for our team to emphasize the armor quality by having them be bigger and more blunt. The dragon scales on his forearm are a stark contrast as they are smaller and sculpted to look like a pretty dense layer of dragon scales. The shape of the scales are also made to look thinner, unlike the scales on the body. All the scales on the storm drake are painted with a metallic blue with purple accents, which helps to replicate the look of the storm drake's video game counterpart. Now, the sheen adds to the mythical quality just like the dragon scales on the waistcloth. The dragon scales on the forearm extend into his claws, which has a very similar look to bird claws. Our team used a distinct segmented texture of bird claws and replicated it right here. The texture is enhanced after adding the grayish-purple color. Furthermore, they also made sure to sculpt the knuckles and joints so the shape of the claw is more realistic. The nails all come down to an almond tip and they were sculpted to look a bit scratched up and are painted with a gray color to maintain the consistency of the overall color scheme. And in contrast to the tough, strong-looking dragon scales, we have feather details from the wings of the storm drake. Fans will remember in the cutscene that this storm drake has wings, and the feathers here are meant to represent that. They are sculpted in a manner in which you see the very distinct lines that represent the realistic structure of feathers. And they have been sculpted with a similar color scheme to the dragon scales, since they all tie in together. Now, the way that the feathers have been designed to lay on top of the storm drake makes them look softer than the rest of the dragon. Now let's move on to the underbelly, and I'm super excited to use this term because I've used it before. The storm drake's ventral grooves are sculpted, so you can actually feel the ridges. The segments on the underbelly look layered and thick as well. The texture is a mixture of wrinkles and lines that are emphasized by the coloring, which of course helps to create the aged look. Now, even more textured than the underbelly is the head of the storm drake, which is so extensively detailed that I gotta take a deep breath first. Alright, the head of the storm drake has so many deep grooves and ridges on the top and sides of the head. But underneath the chin down to the neck, there's a wrinkly texture to imitate the loose skin that we often see in lizards in real life. The wrinkles are more shallow underneath the chin and it gets deeper as it gets closer to the body. The texture of those wrinkles make the skin there look softer than that of the underbelly. The top and sides of the head have deep ridges, and they really emphasize the age of the storm drake. With the way that the head's been sculpted, you can actually see the realistic look of the dragon's skin wrapped around the horns. So, not only do you see the wrinkles, you also see how the skin would realistically react when it's wrapped around horns with a specific shape. Now, the horns that extend from the head have grooves and segments, but our team did a great job of differentiating the textures between what is skin and what are the horns. So visually, they look even more realistic. Parts of the head that's been sculpted to look dimensional as well are the nostril, teeth, and the eyes. Well, eye, because you can only see one here. Both are small details, but our team's meticulous care made sure that those were done accurately, just like the wrinkles and the body details of the storm drake. Back to the horns and the tendrils that we see coming from his head. There are quite a few horns and they've been sculpted to curve around the Nameless King. You can actually look in between his legs, with his consent, and you'd see part of the horn that curved under. The horns are sculpted to look segmented, and the horns are supposed to look like they have facets and grooves. So, even the way that they curve is much more dynamic, and each horn curves in a distinct manner. The horns are painted with a similar shade to the head, but of course our team added a darker gray down the center and added a bit of lighter brown on the edges near the end of the horns, so as to replicate a more weathered look just like the rest of the statue. And along with the horns, our team has also included the pale purple tendrils, which are sculpted to be skinny and to curve much the same way the horns curve, but obviously more distinct as well. However, the tendrils create the effect that they are flowing due to the wind from the storm. So the way that they curve is much more random and meant to look quite chaotic, much like how hair would get messy in the wind for us mere humans. Now, having the rigid structure of the horns as well as the more flowy, softer structure of the tendrils make the statue more dynamic visually, and it doesn't lose the sense of momentum. In order to differentiate the different textures and materials, painting was an essential part. Our team painted the parts of the dragon that are meant to be skin with a mixture of light grays, dark grays, and grayish purple, all of which not only ties in with the rest of the color scheme, but it also helps to create a much more subtle yet defined look of the dragon, as it emphasizes the grooves, ridges, and wrinkles. For the base, our team was inspired by the arched dragon peak and its floors, so they designed the base to look as if the bricks have come loose due to time and are weathered. Now they are all layered atop of one another, so the structure itself is not regular and looks more tattered. The bricks are sculpted to have irregular shapes, and our team has included cracks, broken edges, as well as scratches to better emulate the weathered look. Now the color that our team chose from the base is reminiscent of how the floors at Archdragon Peak looked, which is mainly beige with dark gray to emphasize the cracks as well as scratches. There are also hints of brown on the rocks to imitate the look of weathered rocks, which helps to bring more depth. Now, having Nameless King and his Storm Drake atop the floors of Archdragon Peak will really bring players back to the time that they had to try to defeat him. All elements of this statue work beautifully together to present the iconic Nameless King and his Storm Drake. Whew, okay, we made it through all the details. So, before we move on, let's quickly watch a recap of the standard edition of Nameless King statue. Great recap as always, guys. Now next to me is the exclusive edition of Nameless King. Now both the standard and exclusive editions will present the same beautiful details, but with the exclusive edition, we have included 2 LED functions for his weapon, the Dragon Slayer Sword Spear, to better represent the power that the Nameless King has. And those modes are animated and static. So now let's turn off the lights and check it out. Now when lit in animated mode, the light will pulse as if the energy is glowing from within, which really ties in with the magical, powerful aspect of the Nameless King. And while in static mode, the sword spear will light up, making it look charged up. I really love how this effect looks, as if you can get a sense of the power that the Nameless King has absorbed from his dragon. Now let's turn the lights back on so you can see my face. There we go. Now the good thing about our exclusive edition is that you can have two options on how you display our Nameless King. So whether you want the lights on to display his power or you want the lights off to show off Nameless King and his dragon, you'd be able to with our exclusive edition. Before we see him with the rest of our Dark Souls lineup, let's first watch the recap of the exclusive edition of Nameless King Resin Statue. Roll the clip! And we are back and joined by some of our Dark Souls lineup. Artorias, the Abyss Walker, Dragon Slayer Ornstein, and Nameless King. Dark Souls have always had such intricate character designs, and it is always fun to see our team take that and bring it to life. So if you own any of these or our other Dark Souls statues, now you can see how our Nameless King would look side by side. Nameless King is a huge statue, so for the rest of our lineup, you can check out this picture now! And with that, let's talk about pricing. The price for the standard edition is as follows, and it will be available for pre-order on our website, first4figures.com, and at your local retailer. The price for the exclusive edition is as follows, and is available for pre-order only on our website, first4figures.com. This edition will include two LED modes, animated and static, for his Dragon Slayer Sword Spear. So, to recap, these are the prices for all editions. All prices indicated here exclude local taxes and shipping. So for example, the EU, UK, and Australia regions, prices will look different on our website, as they are already inclusive of sales tax. We are running an early bird offer till this day, so be sure to place your orders quickly within that time frame to take advantage of this limited time offer. For website pre-orders, we offer payment plans with extra fees for those who wish to purchase in installments. We also have warehouses in the following locations, which means no import fees for these regions. Shipping costs to your country are estimated at checkout time. The final cost will be shown on the invoice, which will be sent to your registered email when your order is ready to ship. Thank you for joining us for our Dark Souls Nameless King Resin Statue launch stream. Check us out on our website, first4figures.com, for more details, and follow us on our social media channels so you don't miss out on future news and teasers. We also have an amazing community on Facebook called the First Four Figures Official Collectors Club, where we chat with our members, run polls, post behind-the-scenes contents, giveaways, and much more. So don't forget to check us out. Lastly, pre-orders are now open. Links are in the description. And that's a wrap. Thank you for joining us today. F4F is love, F4F is live, and we shall see you in the next one. Bye!